call the meeting to order such as it is at 4:07. So far, we have co-chair Roy Gott, Sandy Fortin, Mike Summerer for the committee, and Amber Bloom, Island Institute as a guest. We'll skip the approval of the minutes, but you both got the opportunity to review them.
Nope.
Or Sandy, you weren't
Yeah.
here for that meeting, I don't think so.
Yeah, I reviewed them in the email. It's
Okay.
good.
Right. Let's see. Sorry, got a notification. Wanted to make sure it wasn't anybody trying to get in. All right, update of action steps from prior meeting, RFP discussion and interview planning. So I guess I'll just lead off with Sandy. Mike and I just were briefly talking before you came on the call here. That, I mean, it seems to be pretty straightforward. We just need to really interview representatives of Consolidated and Spectrum, at least to be
Mhm.
respectful of the response such as they made it. And I think that's something that Mission Broadband is going to be able to facilitate, those organizing those meetings. And it may come down to, I mean, if we're good with the date that I have for January 24th for the next meeting, if they're available for that date, I'd say we do that date if that makes sense to both of you.
Yep. So Wednesday, January 24th.
I see Mike looking at a calendar, or what I assume is a calendar, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so far so good.
Is that an afternoon meeting?
Yeah, 4 p.m.
That's what I thought. Okay, perfect.
And so, I mean, that is, I'm pretty sure, our next step with the RFP process. But did either of you have some thoughts that you want to go into regarding the RFP, since this is really the first meeting we've had since they've come back that we've had a chance to review?
Just
I don't
my
know.
immediate reaction is their responses. It was disappointing that we didn't get more responses.
Mhm.
It's disappointing that they really didn't try to meet the letter of our RFP, all the elements. I suspect that we're going to get to a point where we have to choose an easy way out with one of them, understanding that it means giving up control and really perpetuating the existing relationship we have with providers, or take the more difficult path, which is to create our own solution.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's an error in the wording of the consolidated RFP, which is something I just wanted to point out. Let me see if I can pull it up here, because I think that would be useful just to look at. It made it into the summary, which was why it sounded weird to me at the time. Let's see, where are those? Consolidated. Okay, and I'll bring up the sharing here in a second. But in any case, the wording was, in the town-funded scenario, Consolidated Communications would own the network. And I believe that's an error, because the next line, the next sentence is Consolidated would receive exclusive right, basically, to operate on that network for 20 years. Well, if they own the network, there's no need to specify they have the exclusive right to operate over that network. I think the only reason to mention they have the exclusive right to operate over that network is if somebody else owns it. And that was the way their RFI was stated. So I believe that's just an error in there, because in their RFI, Consolidated did say that they could build a network that would belong to the town, but Consolidated would just require the exclusivity for 20 years. So it's not really the open access model that we were asking for ideas about from respondents, but it is still, assuming that's an error, and given the inconsistency of the wording, I suspect it is, then at least it's a model that they have proposed that includes town ownership of the network, even if it's not open access until at least 20 years down the line. So that's just something to keep in mind. I can bring it up if you would like me to, but on the screen.
So why do you think they chose 20 years? Are they hoping? I don't remember all the details if they're there.
There was,
Are they hoping for 20 years to get the full return on investment, or are they just hoping to maximize their profits for 20 years?
I suspect a lot of it is return on investment. Also, that gives time for Consolidated serving the network to become sort of just the de facto, the way it is, and people to get
Yeah.
used to it and forget about the intent. Because 20 years is a long time for people to, I mean, like the cable contracts with the towns. Every time they roll around for renewal, people forget what they were supposed to do, that they realize they forgot the last time. So,
Yeah.
I suspect it's a nice safe number for them.
I do wonder about that timeline. And the previous cable contracts that both towns had, I thought it was like a 10 or 15 year, maybe. Do you happen to recall?
I don't know when it is. I just know every time that the discussion comes up, um, it's because when they renewed it last time, the cable company guaranteed the town a cable drop, not cable internet, but a cable TV drop. And it's like, well, if really that's not useful to the town, what would be useful is cable internet supplied.
Right.
So that's why that's the only reason I get involved in those discussions.
Yeah.
And it's always, oh, we renewed that like 2 years ago. It's like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would just bring up a devil's advocate about what is going on around the rest of the state. Like, what is the timeline that's acceptable? Only because I've heard in Winter Harbor Select Board conversations about this timeline with their current contract. And when we were bringing up how do we get new internet and whatnot, it seems to be a bit of a sticky subject because there's this contract that lasts so many years. We can't do anything until that contract's ended. So just my experience in things I've heard, I don't know if it'll slow things down in conversations moving forward, but
yeah, you mean the contracts with the cable providers?
yeah.
Yeah.
And now moving into internet providers, right? As we look at this as a contract, how is it going to be received by
Yeah.
the townspeople?
Well, the thing with the cable thing is it's basically a mini monopoly in the town. Like, here's your contract. We agree to provide service,
Yeah.
and here's a period of so many years.
Mhm.
And I don't know the internet. I don't know what the genesis of that is.
Mhm.
Here's Bob. And maybe Bob has the answer to that, because
Yeah.
that's definitely a cable question.
Yeah.
Hi, Bob. Well, he doesn't look muted. Can you hear us?
Looks like he's up there examining those Starlink satellites right now.
All right. Well, we'll let Bob get settled in, and then we'll come back to that question. But I agree, Mike. I think we're going to end up picking the best option we have available. I don't think we're going to get much more interest. Like you said, we're in an area where we're not so bad that it's really dire for a lot of people, but it's certainly not good for most people in this, or a lot of people in the service area. So the urgency just isn't there. And especially with the RDOF areas that Consolidated has a requirement to fill in, and I mean, it really narrows it down. So I know I said this before. I'd rather have a project than no project, and at this point, I think just on this basis of the responses, I think the consolidated route is the simplest way to go for the communities to get what we've been asking for as soon as possible. Bob, are you with us?
Can see him, but he's not responding.
Yeah. He's not muted, so I'm just wondering if it's like a,
It's a bandwidth problem.
Right, yeah, well,
he's got that 500 gig, 500 meg spectrum.
Hmm.
I feel like we're on a phone.
yeah. Oh, maybe he has it muted on the phone.
I don't know. Um,
Yeah, so I think that's where we're going to end up in a couple more months, is deciding to take the easy way out and give up some of the ideal goals that we had, including a high degree of local control and long-term economic benefit for the town in exchange for getting fiber to the majority of the addresses at reasonable cost at the beginning.
Right. And it's still, I mean, it still comes with some of the same burdens that we would have had anyway. We're going to either be taking on debt that Consolidated would then hypothetically pay back, or we're doing grant funding and getting these different rounds of BEAD funding or whatever it is coming down the pipeline. It's still going to be the same sort of financial situation. It's just a question of who owns it in the end. If we do go the consolidated route and say we want to own the network, then it doesn't prohibit us from going open access down the line. It just sort of pigeonholes us into the network that Consolidated plans to build, regardless of what other providers might do.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. Bob, can you wave if you can hear us? All right, so we got that. Now you show you're muted, which you didn't show before.
Here we go. Can you
There it
hear?
is. We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, essentially I'm blind. I'm sorry. I apologize. Been trying to get in. And so,
That's all right.
So I'm joining a little late to the dance party here.
It's all right. You made it in. We were just having a discussion. I don't know how much you heard, just about the RFPs. Next step being if Mission Broadband can coordinate it to have representatives from Consolidated and Spectrum to talk about their responses at our next meeting on January 24th, that we'd like to try and do that. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. Having each vendor come in, and I guess it would be separately.
Well, I mean, we could do a waiting room and ask them to come in and go out, certainly.
Yeah, Yeah, in every RFP I've ever participated in, like working for Spectrum or any other carrier, we've always done it separately so we could speak freely and
Yep.
not worry about giving trade secrets or anything like that
Mhm.
away.
Yep.
Now the question, the questions that I had was, I think Spectrum is still using hybrid cable, so I mean,
They are, um, and certainly that's, like you'd mentioned, that doesn't meet the letter of our requests in the first place.
that
They
that's
do
correct.
they do say, however, in their response that they are working toward a technology to allow symmetrical speeds
Yeah, and
in the
that's
gigabit area.
Yeah, that's DOCSIS 4.0. So
Sure.
I mean, whenever it becomes available,
Mhm.
there, who knows? I mean, it's still
Right.
probably in testing. But and what is the issue with Consolidated?
There's not really an issue so much. They said in their response they don't see a good working model and they're not comfortable to propose anything on the lines of a open access network. But as I was saying to Mike and Sandy here, I believe there's an error in the response that it says that just read it back again. It says, in the town-funded scenario, Consolidated Communications would own the network. Consolidated would receive exclusive right, et cetera, to operate the network for a period of 20 years. And in their RFI, the town-funded scenario, the town owned
Mhm.
the network and they received an exclusive right. So I believe this is just misworded here. That
Mm,
I wouldn't expect them to change their proposal for a town-funded model in only one way to make it their own network, and then have the need to specify that they will have the exclusive right to operate on the network for 20 years. So I think that's an error in here. So there's still, we get clarity from them on that point when we
sure.
meet, but assuming my interpretation of what's been before and what's there now is correct, then there's still the possibility for the towns to own the network. And then after the exclusivity period has ended, we could operate with a different provider or providers and convert it to open access if we so
Mm,
choose. I think that's a possibility. So I don't
mm,
know that there's an issue per se in the consolidated model. I honestly think it's the easiest way going forward because I think they offer a package that they've probably put into place in several other towns.
yeah, yeah. Well, to have the wisdom of Solomon,
Mhm.
uh, it never hurts to ask.
Right. Um,
Never hurts to ask.
anybody have anything else they wanted to add on RFP discussion? I know Mike's got a stop at 5 o'clock. Go ahead, Sandy.
Just a suggestion, maybe on the January 24th, speaking of what they're doing in other towns, do we want to have a representative from MCA or Island Institute be present through that process as well? That may be more fluent with what's going on in other towns?
Well, the invitation always goes out to the consultants we have on the email. I know Amber probably is joining us in response to one of those, when we send out the agenda. So they're welcome to send somebody and offer whatever perspective, I would say.
Sandy, I think you have a wonderful idea. I think it would be worthwhile to have a representative from MCA present.
All right. So if we don't have anything else on RFP discussion and interview planning, I'll just
Mhm.
jump back without objection to approval of the minutes. Now that we have Bob.
Move
Uh,
approval.
all
Second,
right,
Yep,
a
I
motion and
approve.
a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. back to update of action steps. I'm going to share screen. So we have the mailer that I'm sure everybody got to see, and this is not exactly how the finished thing would look, but this is what Dan has put together before it goes to the printers for them to be able to develop a proof and send it back to us for approval. This incorporates the changes that the committee mentioned over email. And so I think this is pretty much ready to move forward to that stage. So what I would be looking for is a motion to approve submitting this postcard, this mailer to the printers, and to give me to authorize Roy to authorize the final mailing when the draft comes back. Does that make sense to people? So we don't have to come back and vote on the final one.
So moved.
Second.
Any
Quick
discussion?
Quick discussion. My view of the top part of that card, Schoodic is not visible. Is that?
Yeah, that's because this is done as a PowerPoint right now.
Okay,
And
perfect.
this is just a preview version that he's going to send up to them, and then they'll do the actual proof and send
Got
it
it.
back to us. And if there's still that problem, then we're going to get that fixed with them.
Okay, just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Yeah.
All set.
Anything else on that? And of course, there's also the update that's going to be posted on the website to coincide with the mailing of this. And if there's any further tweaking that we want to do on that update, we can always make that adjustment. That's just for me to copy and paste onto the website. So
Okay.
in the absence of any other discussion, we have a motion and a second to authorize the printing of the mailer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. All right, just an update. Kendra Joe is not here, but she did meet with Dan and myself when we went over the mailer last week or the week before. And obviously we were trying to get this in by the end of the year so it could fit into the Get Ready Connect funds. The goal, worthy goal, we're still going to advance it as quickly as we can, but we do not have the deadline that we had before. They're working towards extending the deadline of the grant so that people can spend down the funds further. So
Right.
just to give you that update that we don't have that hard fast December 31st deadline to spend it. So a little bit more time. They just don't want to have to claw back the money. They'd rather communities continue to use it for this purpose.
Sure.
That's always helpful. Also, I have on here to pursue or not pursue an interlocal agreement. And I bring this up in light of the responses that we got to the RFP, because I really feel like if we go with either of, Spectrum is not, again, doesn't meet even the spirit of a response to our request. But the consolidated one, if we were to go with something in that format, I don't think there's a need for an interlocal at this point in time. I think this would be an agreement, since it seems like if we're going to have to when we involve the towns, it's going to be probably if we go the bond funding route, especially, and I think those would have to be done with the towns directly. So I don't know that pursuing an interlocal and a separate nonprofit organization would further our efforts at this point with the options we have in front of us. I think it would just add more work and be another layer, and I don't think it would make the end result any better. I think if we have if we do go the community-owned route that I believe was intended by one of the options in Consolidated's response,
Mhm.
that at the end of the 20-year exclusivity period, I think at that point, we could look at, we have this network that is now going to become available to be used by others. I think that would be a time when, if we wanted to go open access, we could look at forming an organization at that point. But I just don't know that it helps us right now.
But the bottom line is, if the situation changes, we can always pursue that. We don't have to wait. If the landscape shifts under our feet, we can always go down that path.
Right, we can always reinvent the wheel again.
Yeah.
But I think with what, like I said, for what we're doing right now, I don't see a benefit to pursuing it, so.
Mm.
And Eve at the town office in Goldsboro was asking me if we still wanted to pursue it, because they had their special town meeting last, a couple of weeks ago for the, I think it was for the ordinance change.
Mm.
And obviously we weren't ready to answer about it at that point, but she thinks there'll be another one coming up sooner at some point
Right.
here. So just wanted to know whether or not to put it on the agenda. So my feeling right now is that we table the interlocal and the nonprofit for the time being.
Yep.
As
As
long
you
as we have an option.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we find somebody that wants to pony up $6 million and wants to build something for us, and we
Yep.
have to operate. I mean, we can always do that ourselves later on.
Yeah.
It's just a question of what we do right now. So nothing precludes us from doing it in the future. It's just, again, when
Yep.
does it make sense to? When do we get benefit from it?
Yeah.
So. So if that makes sense to people, I will let Eve know that we're not going to pursue an interlocal agreement for the time being. I mean, the good news is it's
Right.
been reviewed by the lawyers and they're mostly okay with it. So we know it's a sturdy concept. We just
Mm.
need to, if we want to pursue it, we'll just polish it up in the future.
Yep.
Okay.
We can revisit that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So most of what we have left, and I put it on information gathering. That's going to be for next time. Interview RFP respondents. I will reach out to Mission Broadband about setting up interviews, and if they
Mhm.
can't make that day, and we can propose, different times for that matter. And like I said, just have the waiting room enabled and bump a person out into the waiting room, or even do a breakout room to keep them separate.
Sure.
So we can do it at different times. But if they can't make that day, I'll reach out to the committee and we can float some ideas around based around their schedule. Does that work?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. And then update for the town reports. Let me bring that one up. Not that it is anything that we absolutely have to do right now, but I can forward it along if you're interested. It's the text that we submitted last year. Whether or not it actually made it into the town report, I can't absolutely say,
Mhm.
but this was what we submitted to them for the town reports last year. Obviously, there's a little bit of updating that needs to happen. This was also used to inform the mailer article that goes on the website. But I would say if there are any thoughts that people want to get into the town report for next year, that this would be something you should send me in an email and we'll get it incorporated.
Well, I think it's better to over communicate.
Yes.
So are you asking for us to update this right now or just send in suggestions for updated wording? I think the deadline for the Gouldsboro Town Report is more like February 15th. Or
Right.
thereabouts.
Yeah, we're not on a crunch at the moment. I would say just be something that people are thinking about, and any ideas. I mean, if you'd like, I can forward this to you. I'm sure probably it's buried in a lot of people's emails way back in the day.
From way back.
Uh,
You know, it might be helpful to update this after we have the January 24th meeting. We could probably provide more detail.
I think so.
Uh,
So we can leave that on the agenda for the time being. And we
Yeah.
can see what January brings us as far as new information.
Sure.
And that's everything that I have now under other business. Sandy, you had, did you want to have a broader discussion about those those items that you forwarded the committee?
It was just a general discussion as we're looking at the whole program. I don't know that it needs to be a conversation to
Okay.
go into right now.
Okay.
uh,
I think it's a little bit outside of the scope of what this group is trying to do at the moment, but it's certainly a worthwhile effort. And, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
so I know you mentioned about, find here, trying to sort through all my emails. Where are you? Sandy. It's a different one. There was something in there about school and gaming, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah.
And a
Thinking about
question-
the future and connectivity for that, especially at the rec centers.
So certainly, I mean, just from that perspective, I just wanted to offer that I do know that the esports is an ongoing program at the high school level.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I think some of that happens at school. I wonder if there's some part of it. I mean, it seems like a platform that would lend itself to participation from home in the right circumstances as well. So
Right.
Mm.
I know that's something that is ongoing, and it's just a question of, is it going well? Could it be going better because of the technology side of things?
Right. Yeah, it was just one of those curiosities as we think about internet in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be completely different than what we see today.
Oh, yeah.
I will note that they did fix one thing in the consolidated map compared to last time. The RFI did not include Gouldsboro Point Road, and this map in the RFP does include Gouldsboro Point Road.
Oh, that's good.
They mentioned the locations of their central offices, and one of them being, I think they mentioned Sullivan, and one of them being in Melbridge, that cover the area. So, and then of course the other pieces, you know, we talked about before, including the idea of Steuben in this project as well. And so I think that's something that, you know, we should still ask if Consolidated would be interested in building out in Obviously, it's going to be at a high level question
Uh-huh.
because they
Mhm.
haven't been asked this detail before, but I know Mission Broadband said they're going to provide, what we should do is we should actually be providing questions that we intend to ask the respondents in
Right.
these interviews. So that's another thing that we should be drawing up as we lead up to that meeting, are the questions that we want to ask the representatives of Consolidated and Spectrum.
Okay. Now, with respect to the CEOs, are they going to offer, or can they offer diverse COs. In essence, if lightning hits, knocks out Sullivan, I'm just can Millbridge take over?
So, yeah, there was a redundancy was addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Let me, I inadvertently close the window. So, but let me pull up the RFP. And we will search for it. All right, our redundancy. Our MPLS core networks will provide standard ring redundancy where fiber exists. There will be a mixture of MLPS rings and hub and spoke technologies to connect the access networking elements to the core network. MLPS ringing environments will take advantage of fast reroute technologies to provide quick conversions in the case of a fiber cut or equipment failure. And then they list the location: 17 Newman Street in Winter Harbor.
Right.
Also a small part of the area also served by Millbridge Central Office at 137 North Main Street and Sullivan Central Office at 56 Taunton Drive. Honestly, I was surprised that, and maybe it's not, maybe it's just for phone, but there's a consolidated building up on Route 1 near
Right.
the Clinic Road. And
Right.
I would have assumed that that might have been a central office as well, but it may not be. They may not base any of their internet service out of that building.
I'm surprised that they have something, well, they have a DSLAM on Newman Street, but that's old technology there.
Right. Well, I imagine they'd be installing new technology in that same building too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, they might continue. It would be a weird thing to continue to offer DSL when you put in
Right.
fiber at roughly the same price.
Yeah.
If I were them, I would retire the DSL and say, okay, everybody's on fiber now.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, you know what? That's a question to ask.
Yeah.
That's a question to ask.
Well,
Yeah.
because, new customer quote, it'll be Fidium. Anybody who's signed up will be Fidium. So technically everybody who does sign up with it should be treated as a new customer, just because they try to keep them separate.
Mm-hmm.
But
On that same topic of redundancy, and this is out of my wheelhouse of understanding, but I would just be curious with Consolidated on Newman Street, if they have a contingency plan for flood. Because Newman Street is in that range of flood zone, and we have had that intersection flooded before.
and it is not far above the intersection, true. Yeah.
Just throwing it out there. It doesn't need to necessarily be brought up as flood, but any kind of emergency like that, it's not in the best of locations.
Well, what happened in Farmington, I would say, can happen here.
Mhm.
There's a lot more water close by us than there is in Farmington,
Yeah.
even though it's not in a river, but
Right.
still.
So just
It's a very, very valid question.
Yeah.
Certainly when it comes to storms and outages, fiber is going to be a little bit easier to keep going than cable, where cable requires those, battery backups. I mean, if you don't have power, your devices are going to be relying on some alternative source of power, no matter what, whether it's battery, whether it's generator. But I know in the same way that phone tends to operate on a basic level when there's a power outage, they do advertise in their RFP that there will be no power related outages because of the fiber service.
Mhm.
There's a break, obviously, like anything. If the cable breaks, the fiber breaks, you're going to have
Right.
an outage.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's agnostic to the technology there.
Got it.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, look at that, Mike. We didn't even run out of time. I would accept a motion to adjourn at 4:47.
I'll make that
Moved.
motion.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody.
See you
Yes.
in 2024.
Yep.
Sounds great.
Take
Thanks for
care.
having me.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Can you just copy?